There's a powerful shift that happens when a woman stops chasing validation and begins turning her energy inward. For so long, many of us have been conditioned to explain ourselves, to defend our choices, to prove our worth. But what if the most transformative thing you could ever do is stay silent, steady, and grounded in your truth? Silence isn't about suppression. It's about choosing not to spend your sacred energy convincing people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It's about creating space inside yourself, space for listening, space for reflection, and space for peace. In that stillness, clarity begins to rise and life starts to fall into place. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean you've abandoned others. It means you finally stopped abandoning yourself. You set boundaries not to build walls, but to create freedom. You honor your body, your heart, and your spirit. And in doing so, you give permission for others to rise into their own wholeness too. Here's the truth. When women stop explaining, stop apologizing, and stop asking for permission, something extraordinary happens. Their lives align, relationships become more authentic, work becomes more meaningful, and their presence without words carries more power than their endless explanations ever did. Everything falls into place, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you become anchored. A woman who knows who she is, who chooses focus and silence over chaos and noise, becomes the kind of steady force the world quietly organizes around. So I want to leave you with this. Your silence is not empty. It is full of wisdom. Your focus is not selfish, it is sacred. And when you choose to honor both, everything, and I mean everything, begins to fall exactly where it belongs. Silence has often been misunderstood. Many see it as weakness, passivity, or even surrender. But the truth is, silence can be one of the greatest demonstrations of strength. When a woman learns to embrace silence, not as something forced upon her, but as a conscious choice, she unlocks a power that words could never hold. Silence is not about shrinking yourself, nor is it about being invisible. It is about choosing where to place your energy, your voice, and your truth. It is about knowing that not every battle is yours to fight, not every opinion requires your response, and not every misunderstanding needs your explanation. Think about it. How much energy do we lose in the constant cycle of defending, explaining, and proving? We are taught from an early age to be agreeable, to smooth things over, to make sure everyone is comfortable with us. And in that process, we hand over our power piece by piece. When we try to speak louder just to be heard above the noise, we forget that true influence doesn't always come from volume. It comes from presence. Silence allows us to reclaim that presence. When you stop rushing to respond and start listening not only to others but to yourself, you discover clarity. That clarity is where power lives. It's where you recognize what is truly worth your attention and what isn't. Silence gives you the space to decide, is this conflict worth my energy? Is this criticism rooted in truth or in someone else's fear? Is this conversation going to nourish me or drain me? Without silence, we react. With silence, we respond, and sometimes the most powerful response is none at all. Silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you know you don't have to say it right now. It means you are choosing to hold your peace rather than spilling it carelessly. That choice is strength. In a world that pressures women to explain themselves endlessly, silence becomes radical. It becomes a statement that says, I am grounded in who I am. I don't need to convince you. My worth is not up for debate. There's also a quiet kind of courage in resisting the urge to fill every space with words. Silence allows your energy to speak before you do. People can feel it, the steadiness, the calm, the unshakable truth that radiates when you no longer need to prove yourself. That is why silence, when chosen intentionally, commands more respect than shouting ever could. It shifts the balance. It tells the world that you are not moved by noise, that you are listening to something deeper, your own inner knowing. And perhaps the most beautiful part of silence is that it creates room for self-discovery. In the stillness, you begin to hear the whispers of your own heart. You notice what you've ignored for too long. You recognize what you truly desire, what you fear, and what you need to let go of. Silence gives you the chance to meet yourself again, and when you meet yourself with honesty and compassion, you become unbreakable. So silence is not weakness. It is not retreat. It is a deliberate act of strength, a reclaiming of your energy, your peace, and your power. It is the quiet assurance that you don't have to rush, don't have to defend, and don't have to explain. You are enough as you are in the stillness. And from that stillness, life begins to organize itself. Silence is not the absence of power. It is its purest form. Focusing on yourself has long been misinterpreted as selfishness, but in reality, it is an act of self-preservation and wholeness. For too many women, life becomes a constant balancing act, caring for family, managing careers, meeting expectations, and trying to live up to the endless roles that society assigns. In this race to keep everything and everyone afloat, it's easy to lose sight of your own needs, your own dreams, and even your own identity. But the truth is, when you abandon yourself in the name of serving others, you slowly run out of the very energy, love, and joy that once fueled you. That's why turning inward, reclaiming your focus, and prioritizing your own well-being isn't selfish. It is necessary. Think about the oxygen mask rule on airplanes. They tell you to secure your own mask before helping anyone else. Why? Because you cannot give breath to another if you are gasping for air yourself. The same principle applies to life. When you care for yourself, when you focus on your own healing, growth, and strength, you actually become more capable of offering genuine love and presence to others. It is not about ignoring the people you love. It's about making sure you don't lose yourself while loving them. Focusing on yourself begins with giving yourself permission to listen to your own needs. That means paying attention to what your body is asking for, whether it's rest, movement, nourishment, or simply a moment of stillness. It means noticing when your heart feels heavy and creating space for joy, creativity, or healing. It means asking yourself not just, what do others need from me today, but also, what do I need from myself today? This shift in perspective changes everything because it puts you back in relationship with yourself. And here's the powerful truth. When you focus on yourself, you teach others how to treat you. You show them what respect looks like by respecting your own boundaries. You show them what value looks like by valuing your own time and energy. And you show them what love looks like by loving yourself without apology. In this way, focusing on yourself doesn't take away from others. It sets a new standard standard that ripples out to everyone around you. There is also a deeper level of freedom in this practice. When you stop obsessing over how others see you and begin focusing on how you see yourself, you are no longer trapped by external approval. You no longer live your life waiting for validation. Instead, you find a sense of peace that comes from knowing your worth is not determined by how much you give, how perfectly you perform, or how much you sacrifice. Your worth is already whole, already enough, simply because you exist. Focusing on yourself is the act of remembering that truth and living from it. Some might call it selfish, but selfishness is about taking without regard for others. Self-focus is about giving to yourself so you can live in alignment with who you truly are. The difference is profound. One drains life from the people around you. The other creates more life, more love, and more authenticity in your relationships and in your world. So, focusing on yourself is not an act of isolation. It's not a wall that separates you from others. It is the foundation that allows you to show up with integrity, presence, and joy. When you are whole, your relationships thrive. When you are centered, your work carries meaning. And when you are nourished, the love you give becomes a gift rather than an obligation. To focus on yourself is to say, I will not abandon me anymore. And when you make that choice, you discover a life that is richer, freer, and more aligned than you ever thought possible. When women choose alignment over approval, they step into a freedom that cannot be measured. Approval is seductive. It feels good to be liked, to be accepted, to be seen as agreeable or accommodating. But living for approval is a fragile way to exist. Approval shifts depending on who you are with, what season of life you're in, or what people need from you at that moment. It is conditional, fleeting, and often manipulative. When you give your power to approval, you lose your center. You start bending, reshaping, and silencing yourself just to fit into the mold others expect. Alignment, however, is something entirely different. Alignment is choosing to live in a way that honors your deepest truth, your core values, and your inner knowing, regardless of who claps for you or criticizes you. Living in alignment doesn't mean life becomes easy. In fact, sometimes it means disappointing others, walking away from roles or relationships that no longer fit, or saying no when you used to say yes. But the cost of living for approval is far higher. When you chase approval, you lose yourself. When you choose alignment, you may lose some people, but you find yourself, and that is the most important discovery of all. Women who prioritize alignment send ripples into every part of their lives. In families, alignment teaches children that authenticity matters more than perfection. A mother who lives in alignment shows her children that they don't need to shrink themselves or betray their own values just to belong. She models that belonging starts within. In relationships, alignment builds honesty and depth. Instead of relationships being built on performance or pretending, they become rooted in truth. That truth might be uncomfortable at times, but it is far more sustainable than living in the shadow of approval. In workplaces, alignment changes culture. A woman in alignment doesn't tolerate toxic patterns just to be liked. She sets a new standard of respect and integrity. She leads by example, showing that courage is more powerful than compliance. Her presence shifts the environment because alignment carries a kind of authority that no title or approval can match. There's also something deeply magnetic about alignment. People may not always agree with you, but they will respect the clarity you carry. When you no longer twist yourself into shapes for others, you become trustworthy. People know where you stand. They know your yes means yes, and your no means no. That consistency builds influence. And even those who don't support you begin to recognize the strength of someone who refuses to betray herself. But alignment doesn't happen overnight. It requires listening deeply to your own intuition, your body, your heart. It means asking hard questions. Am I living in a way that reflects my values? Am I saying yes when I mean no? Am I betraying myself to keep the peace? And then it requires courage to shift. Sometimes that shift is small, like speaking up in a conversation where you once stayed silent. Sometimes it's life-changing, like walking away from a career or relationship that no longer serves your truth. The beauty of alignment is that it simplifies life. Approval will keep you running in circles, always chasing, never arriving. Alignment grounds you. It brings a calm confidence because you no longer measure yourself by external applause, but by internal peace. You stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, am I being true to myself? That single shift changes everything. When women live in alignment, the world changes around them. Families grow stronger, workplaces grow healthier, communities grow braver. The ripple effect is undeniable because authenticity is contagious. One aligned woman becomes a mirror for others, reminding them of their own power and their own truth. And slowly approval loses its hold, replaced by something far deeper: respect, integrity, and freedom. Choosing alignment over approval is not easy, but it is worth it. Approval may give you temporary comfort, but alignment gives you lasting peace. Approval keeps you dependent. Alignment makes you free. And when women are free, when they choose truth over performance, everything around them begins to shift toward honesty, courage, and love. The world has a way of rearranging itself around a woman who is grounded in her own truth. There is something unshakable about a woman who knows who she is and no longer wastes her energy trying to prove it. She becomes a steady force, and her steadiness begins to influence everything around her. It's not loud, it's not forceful, it's not about controlling others. It's about the quiet authority that comes from alignment, focus, and inner peace. When a woman reaches this place, she doesn't chase opportunities. They find her. She doesn't beg for love. Love that is genuine gravitates toward her. She doesn't cling to relationships that drain her. She naturally attracts connections that are healthier and more authentic. The world organizes itself around her because she no longer bends herself into shapes that don't fit. Instead, she stands tall, clear, and present. And that presence reshapes the energy of every space she enters. This is not about perfection. It's about consistency. Grounded women still face challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But they face those moments differently. Instead of spiraling into panic or scrambling for approval, they return to their center. They trust themselves. They trust their intuition, and in doing so, they make decisions that align with truth rather than fear. That steadiness has a ripple effect. Children raised by such women learn resilience. Partners of such women experience relationships built on honesty instead of pretense. Colleagues working beside such women find themselves inspired to rise to higher levels of courage and integrity. The world doesn't fall into place because circumstances magically become easier. It falls into place because her energy shifts what is possible. The chaos of trying to be everything for everyone fades. The noise of criticism loses its sting. The weight of expectation no longer dictates her path. When she is grounded, she becomes a filter, allowing only what aligns with her values and peace to take root. Everything else falls away naturally. Think about how a tree functions. A tree doesn't chase the sun, yet it always receives what it needs. It doesn't beg the rain to fall, yet the water comes. Its strength is not in movement, but in stillness, in roots that run deep and branches that extend with quiet confidence. A woman who is grounded in herself is very much the same. She does not chase or grasp. She holds her ground and life flows toward her in response. And perhaps the most powerful part of this truth is how it influences the collective. When one woman chooses to ground herself in truth, others notice. They begin to ask questions. If she can set boundaries, maybe I can too. If she can stop apologizing for existing, maybe I don't have to either. If she can choose peace over approval, what is stopping me? Her example becomes a kind of permission slip for others to do the same. That is how the world begins to shift, one grounded woman at a time. This doesn't mean life becomes flawless. There will still be storms. There will still be critics. There will still be moments of pain. But when you are grounded, storms no longer uproot you. Critics no longer define you. Pain no longer breaks you. You bend, but you don't break. You feel, but you don't lose yourself. You adapt, but you don't abandon your truth. That is the kind of strength the world cannot ignore. So yes, the world organizes itself around the grounded energy of a woman who knows who she is, because when she knows, she no longer begs, explains, or compromises her essence. She simply is. And in that state of being, life, relationships, and opportunities align themselves with her. Everything begins to fall into place, not because she forced it, but because she finally allowed herself to be rooted in truth.